Dark psychology of The Weeknd. Through the 2010s, Abel Tesfaye, better known as The Weeknd, has stood out as one of the most mysterious and misunderstood artists. He has built a career by describing the unpleasant aspects of relationships that aren't nothing like the love songs we have all grown used to. How has he done this? Throughout his career, The Weeknd's music has often delved into the themes of drug use, addiction, and the consequences of these behaviors. This chapter explores how his music has portrayed the dark reality of drug use and its impact on his life and relationships. From the early days of his mixtapes to his more recent albums, drug references have been a recurring motif in The Weeknd's lyrics. He often sings about the allure of drugs, how they provide an escape from pain and reality, and the destructive consequences they bring. The presence of harder drugs immensely made its presence known during his trilogy era. In his song Initiation, he expresses how he uses drugs to have women join his crew, which is known as XO. The lyrics "the boys" in this song being a representation of drugs. In songs like The Hills, The Weeknd describes a hedonistic lifestyle fueled by drugs and casual encounters, painting a picture of temporary pleasure, masking deeper emotional turmoil. The lyrics suggest a reliance on substances to cope with emotional pain and fill a void in his life. As his career progressed, The Weeknd's music continued to explore the dark side of drug use. In the album Starboy, he sings about the excesses of fame and how drugs became a way to numb the pressures of his celebrity status. The line between his on-stage persona and his personal life blurs, and he grapples with the toll drugs take on his well-being. The After Hours album takes the theme of drug use to a new level, with tracks like Blinding Lights and Heartless portraying a sense of desperation and self-destructiveness. The accompanying music videos depict a surreal and chaotic world, mirroring the disorienting effects of substance abuse. In interviews, The Weeknd has been candid about his own experiences with drugs, particularly during his earlier years when he was struggling to make a name for himself in the music industry. He has spoken about using substances as a coping mechanism and how they affected his mental and physical health. In many ways, The Weeknd's music serves as a cautionary tale, shedding light on the dark and often destructive consequences of drug use. It reflects the emotional and psychological toll that addiction can take on an individual's life and relationships. While his songs may glamorize the party lifestyle, they also reveal the emptiness and despair that can lie beneath the surface. First, let's take it all the way back to 2011. Remember when most of us had no idea who he was or what he even looked like? Even till now, The Weeknd rarely grants video interviews. In the early days, The Weeknd was so mysterious that no one knew if he was a solo singer or a band. Most people just thought, wow, this group has a really good vocalist. Next, you get hit with the lyrics. Very quickly, listeners get enthralled by the vulnerability behind the words, as the mysterious vocalist continues to drive in his innermost thoughts and expressions. Talk about an artist who does not need to put himself out there just so his music can be heard. He is simply just that good. Even with the mystery, he is still able to connect with listeners on a deeply emotional level. But just because he can doesn't mean he has to. Why did he feel this need to be hidden behind the curtain? It is possible that the anonymity was a result of how quickly and seemingly overnight his rise to fame was. When describing his early days as an artiste to GQ magazine, he said, "Nobody knew what I looked like. I was not popping. I was struggling at the time, was folding clothes at American Apparel when somebody at the store played the song. Mind you, nobody knew who The Weeknd was. You know when you can't put a face to a song, you just appreciate it more?" That was it for The Weeknd. Growing up, he had only ever wanted to sing. So it is natural that he liked the anonymity. He liked that nobody knew what he looked like. In his own words, "Nobody knew what I looked like." And I felt like it was the most unbiased reaction you can get to the music, because you couldn't put a face to it, especially R&B, which is a genre that is heavily influenced by how the artist looks. He saw this as a blessing and chose to run with it. But that mystery was not the only appealing thing about his music. Very quickly, people began to notice his dark take on the typical conventions of the R&B genre. If you ask around, a lot of people will describe The Weeknd's music as a fresh take on intimacy, as it reflects the masculine need to hesitate to be truly vulnerable when it comes to relationships, as well as how this internal struggle can manifest in toxic ways. Everyone was captivated by the painfully blunt lyrics of lust and deceit, as well as the brooding guitar strums that added that layer of a sinister undertone to his music at the time. From his first mixtape to his first official album, Kissland, it is evident that The Weeknd felt the overwhelming need to approach music from a place of self-loathing. Even in cases where a song suggests that he feels heartbroken or wronged, The Weeknd will not paint himself as weak or pathetic. Looking back at that era, he seemed to be almost ashamed of getting too emotionally invested in someone. While he didn't think he deserved to be cared for, he also did not find anyone deserving of his time. This is probably why he pushes people away with a grand level of pettiness in most of his songs. Sure, we have heard countless songs about cheating in relationships, but we believe that you would agree with us when we say that The Weeknd takes this concept to a whole new level. The Weeknd is not one to sing about simply ending things when his partner cheats on their relationship. Rather, he will get some petty kind of revenge. Even worse, there will always be an unwillingness to admit the pain he clearly felt from the experience. The Weeknd may have mastered the art of suppressing his emotions as opposed to wallowing in them. This also makes it possible that he is disillusioned, and as such, would never see love and intimacy as straightforward as two people beautifully choosing each other, but rather an entanglement that must be characterized by deceit and lies. When speaking about the Kissland album during a 2013 Complex interview, The Weeknd later admitted that Kissland is like a horror movie. In his own words, "Kissland to me is an environment that's just honest fear. I don't know who I am right now." Following Kissland, The Weeknd's popularity saw even greater heights. He was still singing about the undesirable and messy aspects of love, but this time it had a more refined and distinct sound. The next album, Beauty Behind the Madness, featured a more catchy delivery, as opposed to the graceful flair of the one before it. This era doesn't speak anything new about who he is on a deeper level, but it did prove to the world that The Weeknd could very well achieve mainstream success without compromising his artistic integrity. Around this time, you could say he fully leaned into the persona of a dirtbag. Yes, the sound of his music was changing, but the themes still stayed the same. His videos still maintain the image that he is always surrounded by women and drugs. One thing we will say about this era is that it opened him up to a whole new world. He was stacking up #1 hits, performing on world tours, and even featuring on the soundtracks of blockbuster movies. Now, let's take a look at the Starboy album. Much to the dismay of his OG fans, who loved him for the brooding aesthetic, this next album featured a more banging electronic sound. We believe this was a rebellious era. A point in his life where he felt the need to separate himself from any specific thing that would define his supposed identity. Aside from the distinct change in sound, The Weeknd decided to part ways with his signature hairstyle. In a Wall Street Journal interview, he opened up about the change, saying, "It didn't feel right anymore because it ended up becoming a trademark. I told everybody I was getting rid of it, and everybody, literally unanimously, they were like, 'No, don't do it. That's your whole thing. That's you.' And the way they said that, I was like, 'Oh, I'm definitely cutting it.'" Clearly, he did not want to be boxed into any distinct look or sound genre, and was bold enough to experiment and explore new aspects of his creativity. You could also pick up on the rags to riches theme, as he seemed to have been drawing inspiration from the braggadocio rappers of the 2000s. The dirtbag persona was gone and replaced with a superfly and dope character in the music videos. But despite this, you could still pick up on the subtle fact that The Weeknd could not totally deviate from the dirtbag persona. Staying true to himself, The Weeknd still put in a couple of songs like Die For You and True Colors that were surprisingly vulnerable. Surprising because if the lyrics of the songs were anything to go by, then The Weeknd was seemingly ready to let down his walls, which will allow him to be emotionally intimate even as his instincts tell him not to. Riding on this same wave of surrendering to emotion, it does make sense that we got the subsequent EP, My Dear Melancholy. Around this time, he had just ended a couple of relationships with his famous partners, and in that moment of pain, he comfortably chose to whip out his old aesthetic. When asked about the EP in a GQ interview, he said, "I used it as therapy. I made it in like 3 weeks. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I knew how I wanted it to sound, and that was it. And then I performed it at Coachella, and boy was that therapeutic." Following that EP, The Weeknd seemingly transitioned into a new era. His work was distinctively more conceptual and magnificent with the release of the After Hours album. Every little change gradually came together by the time we saw the video for the song Heartless, as he donned a new haircut, a little facial hair, as well as that distinct red suit. This was the birth of a character seemingly separate from himself, an alter ego, if you will. Now, let's unpack the music video for Save Your Tears. Still sporting that look, The Weeknd seems to be performing the song in front of a small, masked, and unresponsive audience. Judging from the way he looks, he seems to portray a future version of himself that is almost unrecognizable due to a couple of botched plastic surgeries. At some point during the performance, he pulls out a gun to shoot himself, but it is just confetti that showers out. This prompts a smile from the now cheering crowd. If anything, we think this indicates that he feels trapped by the journey and the lifestyle that comes with fame. He may probably already be feeling like a plastic, soulless celebrity who manipulates themselves for superficial reasons to please and be validated by the public. As he has often been compared to the iconic Michael Jackson, he could very well be questioning if he is also headed for the same tragic fate. The Weeknd's next album, Dawn FM's, leaned into a nostalgic 80s aesthetic, but not everyone would realize that it is thematically reminiscent of the music he made earlier in his career. Only this time, it wasn't a return to those themes, but rather a reanalysis of them. Throughout the album, we see an older version of The Weeknd contemplating his past mistakes and trying to determine who he was and how it led him to where he is at the present time. It seems like the lifetime of keeping people at arm's length has culminated in them moving on from him, leaving him filled with loneliness and regret. He opened up about this in an interview with NME. In his own words, "I spend most of my days alone now. I don't like to leave my house too much. It's a gift and a curse, but it helps me give undivided attention to my work. It is possible that he uses his work to make it all easier." He added that, "Even when I'm not working, I'm always somehow still working. It distracts from loneliness, I guess." This introspection and self-awareness could mean many things, but we believe that it indicates his growth into a more mature and reflective person. So, what does all of this say about his personality? Going by all of it, we will say Abel Tesfaye is an ISFP personality type known to be creative and sensual. This personality loves to experiment and will rather learn by trial and error. In conclusion, The Weeknd's exploration of drug use in his music provides a stark and unflinching look at the dark reality of addiction. It serves as a reflection of his own experiences and serves as a reminder of the dangers of relying on substances to cope with life's challenges. As he continues to evolve as an artist, it will be interesting to see how his music further explores these themes and whether he continues to use his platform to shed light on the complexities of addiction. This pretty much explains his entire career and where he is right now after his debut as an actor in the highly problematic HBO series The Idol. Seeing that he is not afraid to push the boundaries and unapologetically stay true to himself, we expect even more rebellious streaks in the future. What do you think? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. And of course, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Toodles.